Good evening, everyone. Um, so yeah, I'm glad to be here. I'm grateful for being here, and I really appreciate the connection that I get to, or we get to have here. Sky's here. How you going, Sky? It's good to see you here. Um, and it was nice, really nice seeing you the other day as well. I'm like being. Um, I talked about this with my psychologist the other day. How good it is for me to have connection with people and to communicate. And no, thank you. So it's mutual. Um, uh, to by doing these streams and establishing connections with people and having powerful conversations and healing conversations is such a big thing for me. Um, and I get a lot of people tell me how much it means to them, and that means a lot to me again. So it's this thing that just resonant reflections. Good to see you. Awesome. I I want to talk about how I try and differentiate. Michaela's here as well. Awesome. Hey, Michaela. This is awesome. I try and differentiate the streams, and so that people can um, not be confronted with anything that's uncomfortable, so that they at least know what the topic is. And I try and make these Sunday night streams really positive and all about um, what I'm doing to heal, as well as what I'm learning about. And I like to we share what we can do. Um, it's a really great nourishing thing for everyone. Um, and I also have these streams where I talk about heavy topics and very like personal stuff, and that can be triggering as well because of the topics. And so I've got the points here from what I wrote down in the description for the video. And usually what I do with the introduction on the Sunday night stream is I talk about what I have done in the last week and what I've accomplished, and what things that I tried to accomplish and failed at, but I can move past from, difficulties I suffered through the week, things I've learned through the week, you know. So this week has been another interesting week, you know. I had a lot of healing. Got new person to the chat I haven't seen in the chat before. Lashna, good to see you here. Thank for your comment. Um, so this week I didn't I set myself tasks to exercise, and I didn't get any of that done. Um, that's okay. That's understandable. And there's always next week, which is this week now coming. And I really will make an effort. Resonance says you're doing well. Thank you. Um, I have been doing a lot of reading, over the last few months, and I managed to read half a book this week, and I should have completed it, but it did. What Michaela says, they're eating the dogs and they're eating the cats. They're eating the pets. Well, that's bizarre. Um, that is bizarre. Who does that? And who, like, I don't even know. Um, and um, so I've got the points for this talk tonight, and I broke down what I said in the description into points to talk about, and so I'll go through them. And the first point is starting again over and over, and so that's something that I've realized that it is part of healing or growth, is a continual having to start, and it's life. You know, we 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 go through constant setbacks in life. Um, I'll use an example, like someone who's learning how to be a farmer or grow their own food is going to go through failure after failure after failure until they finally get some crop that they could harvest to then eat. And it takes everything takes time, and it takes hard work, so that um you know it takes doing your research and learning about the things. If you go into something without any um, knowledge, then you're alone in this situation, and so everything you do could potentially be a hazard or set you back. And then as a you might have fertile soil, but it just happens to be that when you start your farming practice, it just happens to be that there's several years of either drought, or there's severe rains, or things that come along that interrupt your goal that you want to achieve. So something I've had to think about, and I talk about this all the time: setbacks, and keep going forward. And I talk about the whole thing about, it varies. Sometimes you take 3 steps forward and you one step back. Sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. Sometimes it's 1 step forward, 2 steps back. And the whole point is to keep momentum and keep moving regardless. And um, embracing the fact that you're going to have to keep starting again over and over is something that will help you, because when you're faced with adversity or failures, it's not it's not the end of everything. You understand that you can just keep um you know y- y- it's part of it, and you have to keep pushing, and sometimes then you'll have 3 or 4 steps forward and then just 1 step back. So eventually, over time, regardless of the setbacks, you're going to have a forward momentum. But even if you're moving back and forth constantly, you're still going to have this thing where, by being in motion, it's it's still going to have a beneficial effect by acting and doing. So eventually it will things will happen for you. Um, and this is where I I I normally I try to separate my personal stories, experiences that could be upsetting, and I do want to go through a period of time, but I don't think it's going to upset anyone to hear this stuff. Um, so I've mentioned how I have had um, childhood trauma that essentially created my complex post-traumatic stress disorder, um, and that then exacerbated, stretched out. That I've said how it was just a continual thing for me, and it might sound like I'm always complaining, but I feel like having gone through all these things, um, they were, as much as that there's a lot of pain associated, and I'm only now letting go of things and healing the trauma. I really am. I look at where I am now, and I've made such major progress in um, dealing with it all, and it really does. A lot of it comes down to doing the work and learning how to do it as well, and having enough of a support network to enable that to happen. Um, so I I also said that I won't talk in detail about my adult trauma much, because there's stuff that I can't talk about. But I realized I already have spoken a lot about these things, especially in a lot of really in a lot of streams where I've talked about them. But and I have touched on the fact that I had, similar to it when I was a child, I had um, an intense period of like 4 or 5 years where lots of things happened, and they were also a combination of single events that were varied, and then also um, stretched out um, situational um, living life um, circumstances. So I have talked about how in the last 12 years, 12 to 14 years, that there was a block of um, quite serious things that happen, and so with complex trauma, you know, um, it can happen at any age. It just happened to be for me that I had the complex trauma that started from a young child, and then that was intense for a block of time, which then, from what I've now understood, it affected me with my brain development growing up, and then the carry-on effects of being in a the physical effects. also affected me. And so, but you can get complex post-traumatic stress disorder at any age. It really comes down to um, what you've gone through, and it being um, either a singular or just a few things, or it could be many things. And so for me, many things. So um, I would like to be able to try and talk about this block of trauma that I went through, and I'll do it in a way that hopefully doesn't upset anyone. Um, but I do feel like it's a good opportunity for me to actually um, as a part of this, what I'm it, I've let go of a lot of this stuff, and I've processed a lot of this stuff. Um, but for instance, what happened, I was getting to a point of resolution on a particular thing, and I went about trying to engage with this person about how something was so significant for me, and it was trying to open up the dialogue for sharing and understanding. Um, and I'm looking, and this is the list here of the period of time in my life, and I think about it, and this was over um, 4 to 6 years time, you know, but the bulk of it was in a 4 year period, which then resulted in me going through a complete collapse. So I ended up with executive dysfunction, and um, I barely could function, and I went from having all of this post traumatic growth, and then it all became too much, and that's when I collapsed. And this happened. Um, and then essentially it took many years to recover from that, because I was dealing with the early childhood stuff that had resurfaced. Well, that was always there, but it was really affecting me. But I had this series of adult trauma that was there as well. And so this all makes sense when you um, get to the point where I am now in um, contemplating and processing, and changing life habits, going through starting the healing process, and going through um, the difficulty of facing these things, and um, somehow letting go of them. Even, and this is something that I've said also, is that even after um, processing and forgiving and letting go, you still have the pain of it, and it still has an effect on you. But it's such a relief to actually get to the point where you can function again, or you can find joy in life, simple things that that were taken from you or lost, that you weren't able to you know and coming to terms with the things, and eventually knowing that lust for life and zest for life and passion will return. And even if things were so painful and destructive for you, um, you can still find things that can bring you joy, and you can still work on being present and experiencing life, and reclaiming, taking back the things that were taken from you, and not harbor that pain, and not harbor that um, angst and negativity that dominates your thinking and all that sort of stuff. So um, I'm looking at this list and I'm thinking, do I want to actually try and explain this, or do I even leave it unsaid? Because I I I don't want to impose, and I don't want to. I think there's um, a massive healing aspect in sharing trauma, as long as it's done in an appropriate way. I do have to take this phone call. Hey, Dad, you there? How far off? Yeah, mum's good. She's rested. Yeah, yeah. That's that's all right. I figured that would be the case, but she's settled. She's had all. Yeah, all right. See ya. Okay, thank you. Bye. That was my father. Um, he was meant to be home, um, and this goes into what happened today. Is that I do these streams on a Sunday night because I can make it regular, and it just happened that so I had to make sure that I didn't start the stream without. That's why I had to postpone the stream. Um, so if it's all right with everyone here for me to talk about a period of my life, which was a 4-year period, and um, talk about what I went through without upsetting people, just so you could understand what it was like for me to experience all of these things in a cluster. Or so for me, this is the, it was defining for me that there was this portion of time where these things happen, and they so if I'd never had CPTSD earlier in my life, going through this would have created it anyway. So in a way, I was somewhat prepared, and I could navigate this period of time because I was already adjusted to dealing with um, cyclical or prolonged or ongoing events. So um, I've mentioned how it never really stopped for me. That every year there was always something, in my life. Um, but this is a particular period, and maybe people can resonate with this in the sense that um, complex trauma is complex because it can be um, one thing that is very intense, or it can be multiple things that are at varying levels of intensity. So um, I'm leaving a lot of stuff out of this list, and so if I added in the extra stuff, it would just be too much to even go on about. But um, so I had a friend, um, and he's passed now, and you know I don't know if I feel right talking about what he did to me, um, because I have gone through forgiving him after he had passed. I still harbored a lot of pain beforehand, but eh, essentially he was a friend, and he 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 grew dope. He grew marijuana on the side, type thing, and he s- basically betrayed me in a very hurtful way and traumatic way, and he like, I won't go into any details in any of this stuff, but basically he knew what he was doing, and he deliberately tried to implicate me in what he was doing. So I've been open about in my channel talking about how I used cannabis for many years, and it was like a coping medicine that I used, and it had positive and negative effects. Um, but what this person did was is he manipulated and tricked me into somehow making it like I was part of what he was doing. So it's without going into details, he tricked me and manipulated me into helping him out with something, and that essentially me in a position where it would have been seen, if he was ever to get caught, that it wasn't just him. And this is something that I'm not alone in this. This is something that's happened to many people, and so it's like a form of they. It took me a long time to understand why he did this betrayal. It was a betrayal, and So it's hard to talk about these things without actually explaining what happened. But essentially, I don't see really what he was doing as being such a bad thing compared to other stuff, And he was very low level. He wasn't like he was a big time, you know. Um, but he was breaking the law, and he deliberately manipulated and coerced me, tricked me into helping him do some work on his house, um, which essentially would have had my fingerprints all over parts of um, the entry to where he was growing his dope, and DNA and fingerprints, but um, and I dissociated when it was happening, and he I knew that he'd done this stuff in the past, and he'd already been convicted of doing this himself. But he did this to me, and it really traumatized me a lot. And that's why, for me, emotional or coercion and manipulation is such a big trigger, and that's why I have such strong social anxiety and fear of relationships because of my trust issues, because of this. Because this guy was a friend, and you don't expect friends to do this sort of stuff to you. Um, I at that time, because of all these other stresses I was dealing with, um, not only levels of substance abuse myself, but also, which I consider a form of self harm, but like also I was, because trauma induced self harm at the time. Um, I suffered at that same time. Um, where I was living happened to be where there was a criminal that lived across the road who was a drug dealer, and they made threats towards me because I saw what they were doing, and so this terrified me. Um, so I had failed threats made towards me at the same time my own friend had betrayed me, and um, so this was very difficult to deal with. Um, I, the second one where I'd moved house and location, and um, that the house I was living in previously, um, the one of the reasons why I left where I was living was because um, a makeshift brothel was set up next door to me, and so I've became very fearful because this brothel was run. It was like a brothel out of a house, um, and the mistress was literally going to the shops across the road to sell the services, spruik new clients, and they had, well, we had people parking out the front of our house while they were going to go see this, and it was a very small brothel. It was literally one prostitute and the mistress living in the house, but that can be profitable. That's all it needs to be, and because this was actually set up by someone who was a known underworld figure, um, it was very scary and intimidating for me. So I moved house, and it happened to be where I moved to. I had the same similar thing where the local hard drugs dealer was lived across the road, and they intimidated me because I saw them openly having um, doing their business. And when I moved to this location, I spent thousands and thousands of dollars on, because I always wanted to be an artist, and I didn't have the place to actually make art and stuff. So for a period of my life, I had hired my own art studio, and I was working overtime to pay for it all. And while this was happening, I had all these other things going on. Then, which I mentioned in a recent stream, I was exposed to having to, through work, interact with um, um, a murderer who was under investigation, um, and I had to interact with them as part of my job, and it was very traumatizing because um, on like the first occasion, there was four times where in a period where I had to deliver to them for work, because he was operating a business, and so I was exposed to that as this very traumatic thing because he um, it's like I could see his guilt, and that first time he had the scratches on his face, which were the things that part of what finally got him put in jail, were the scratches that were made while he was going through this act. And I had to interact with his mistress, who worked in the same place, who was implicated in this as well. And then that was very traumatic, because I was trying to make art on the weekends and weeknights, and this is what was happening during my day for work. Um, and so I talked about this in another stream. I don't necessarily want to drag this out, but that was extremely traumatic, to have to engage with someone who was on the news. He was essentially in hiding, and having to still operate his business. Um, and so there were four occasions where I had to interact with this person and the mistress and a detective, and then finally, um, the parcels weren't even delivered to the business. I had to deliver them directly to an investigation unit, and this was really traumatic for me. Um, so I spent thousands of dollars on this art studio, and I made art. I had some great experiences with that. Um, and then I failed with it all in the end, because I had run out of money, and I ended up giving away stuff, throwing away stuff. And so there's a theme where me trying to establish an art career, and also facing all these traumas, was very difficult. Another thing that happened in this time. So this is over a 4-year period. All this stuff. I was witness to a group of individuals. Same thing, just through work, delivering parcels. Um, but I was witness to a group of individuals who were almost certainly the masterminds behind a major crime. And I won't go into details about that, but um, essentially it was looking at levels of crime. It was the level of a crime against the Commonwealth. So it's a very high level crime which they did. So it wasn't just burning a building down, it was burning down a significant building. And um, when I went to one of their other offices in the week or weeks after this event, so literally, um, that drove me into paranoia, because um, people that have that sort of power can do anything, and they also cover their tracks, and um, they don't do the crime themselves. They get other people to do it for them. But when I delivered their next lot of material to their other main office, it was being staffed not by anyone that works there. They were all told not to. Well, they weren't. No one was there, except there was a detective there that was basically manning the desk. And he told me, he said, "Yeah, we know it's arson. We know they did it. and he said, "But we can't do anything about it. We got, it's impossible to prove." Um, and this fed a lot of fear and paranoia into me, because um, I'd seen this group of individuals that were clearly, I won't go into details, but um, essentially I saw who was behind this thing, and it scared the life out of me. So people who witness serious crimes, it causes a massive trauma on them. They fear retribution. Um, I, I can tell you from personal experience. Um, Even though in this situation there was no one could, they got away with it, and that's what the detective said to me. He was like, "Yeah, they get away with it. We can't do anything." And um, this was a crime that not only they benefited millions and millions of dollars out of it, it also um, it was a crime against the Commonwealth, because it was essentially a building that had major cultural significance to the city I live in. And they were redeveloping it and keeping the original structure, except the investors didn't want that. They wanted what they wanted. So that's why they did that, so that they could have a clean slate and make lots more money too. So um, I didn't fear for my life over this, but I sort of did, in a way. Like, I just knowing that, almost without a shadow of a doubt, that these were the people that were behind this major crime. And it's not just me making aspersions. Um, this is based on the way that they were behaving when I interacted with them. Um, so there were some. I had a brief relationship at that point, and that was also traumatic in the sense that, because I was dealing with all of these recent things, I not been able to be myself. Um, so then I had a major car crash at work, and that, I didn't get physically hurt. I had whiplash from it, and I was the first. Like, I was the first car. And I had four cars crash into me. So it was very traumatic, and I quit on the spot on the day. Um, so I had to quit my job, and it affected me for a couple of years. I couldn't drive in public, busy places. Um, because I had resigned and quit, I immediately filed for financial hardship and said I want to pay off my debt, but this is a situation. And I went to a company that specializes in debt consolidation to help me because I was traumatized. I couldn't deal with it. I couldn't even fill out the paperwork. Um, and the way these things work is that they're an intermediary, and then so I communicate with the company that represents me, sort of like a lawyer, and then they deal with the uh, people you owe money to. So I was dealt with in a really bad way in this situation, in several ways. So first, they said we're not even going to look at your situation because you didn't file for insurance claim, and I didn't even look at it because I'd already been. It was traumatic for me to even think about that because I presumed I'd be refused because all I'd ever had with insurance was um, traumatic experiences with insurance, whether it's people um, claiming their own insurance and me for serious uh, things, and then and me being pushed aside and not getting anything. Also, I had my experiences with serious work accidents where I should have claimed for insurance and I didn't. And I had this victim complex where I felt like nothing would ever happen. And this essentially was born out of the early childhood trauma where I was victimized in a particular occasion, and that continued on. I'm sorry if this is too much or boring people, but so I filed. They said we're not going to look at your claim unless you do the insurance. So I filed that, and then they refused it. So I went through that process, and I was proven right that it was just futile, and that's the whole reason why I didn't do it in the first place. And that's what I said to the debt consolidator: is that I'm traumatized at the moment, and this is too much to even think of. I I figure they're going to just refuse me anyway. So why even put me through this process at the moment? I'm more focused on paying off my debt and honoring that. Then, not long after that, while I was still not able to drive long distances and in busy times of the day, I was coerced into helping someone who lied to me about several things. And I was exposed to um, in this help that I was asked to do was to travel long distance. with a stranger, and um, I was exposed to um, someone having a mental health episode, and I froze, I couldn't leave the situation, and um, this situation I was exposed and stuck in was essentially what led someone else to end their own life. And that was very traumatic because I was betrayed and coerced. And then I've gone through a forgiveness process with that, where I've forgiven, um, but it was very painful. Um, and But only reason why I'm talking about this stuff is because it makes sense that when you have these things that are multiple things that are associated, and then they keep happening, and they're not just trivial things, they're extreme things. Um, that's essentially why I have such major trust issues and fear of being manipulated or coerced or lied to, is because of these experiences. Um, I was working on personal growth at the time as well. Um, I was making a lot of art in this post-traumatic situation where I'd been in a serious car accident, quit my job, and there was a woman that I was interested in, and we were interacting and slowly developing. And we'd gone on a few dates a year or so, 2 years previous, and because of my situation at the time, things didn't work out, and so I had a second chance with this woman. Um, and there was an evening where um, I was I'd been drinking, but um, I was sort of coerced into having unprotected sex with a woman, um, and I didn't really want to partake in it because I had such strong feelings with this other woman that I was trying to um, be with, and long term, and I felt coerced into it, even though I obviously partaked, um, and I took the risk myself. Um, I it, it it created a barrier for me for what I was trying to do in um, presenting myself and hopefully establishing a relationship with this other woman. So I had this sort of guilt hanging over me, um, And it's something that played on me for a long time because I had my part in that, you know, when, like, I didn't want to, I really, I really didn't want to. But you know, it's, you get, it's not like I was coerced. I did enjoy the experience, but I felt afterwards that, you know, I'd failed myself because I should have just said no. Um, and it put me off kilter for a while. And I engaged in risky behavior myself. So I had my own self guilt over that. So then I was forced into bankruptcy by a bank that broke law. They broke laws. Um, that doesn't seem like it's so traumatic, but I'd been fighting for so long to pay back a debt after become without a job, and I was paying it regularly, and I'd saved up um, a quarter of the debt, a third. It was about a third. It was a third of what they offered as payment, but it was a quarter of what I'd actually owed. So I was treated improperly, even though I did everything I could to remain solvent and not be bankrupt. And um, the bank had broken laws in the way they treated me. Um, and then I was again manipulated and coerced into helping someone where I was lied to and put in a very difficult situation. And without going into any details, it was essentially um, like a private intelligence operation where um, I was being used as human shield to um, to help someone. Now, this this is why I'm talking about all this stuff today, because I was trying to get to resolution with this, because it caused this caused me to this and all of this stuff resulted in me spending 3 years of agony with executive dysfunction and a nervous wreck because all of these things were so um, some of them might not seem like much, but accumulatively it was so much. And so I actually feel like this final one that I'm talked about was essentially saving someone's life. So it saved this person's life. And But what it did to me was I was triggered so badly because I was manipulated and coerced into going along with this thing. So, um, in intelligence, they call it useful idiot or useful dupe, and it's someone that is part of an operation to create a desired outcome. And this person's life was saved by it, literally. Like he had been threatened by a corrupt government that he was going to be either put in jail unjustly, um, have his life ruined. And so if only I was asked permission, or not asked for my asked to do it, rather than being put in that position without being asked, and then finding out halfway through this is exactly what's going on. At that moment, I dissociated, and it heavily triggered me because it brought me back to this time when a year previously I was lied and manipulated to in order to try and help someone as well. And that actually turned out in a really bad way. I was exposed to a really traumatic event, and then someone lost their life over it. And then I'm asked to help out for this other thing with, and it turned out it saved this person. It rescued this person. And I would do it again if I was asked. And it was relatively safe. My role was just to be there. Um, but it was highly triggering for me because I had a similar situation as a young child where I was used in a very similar situation, but opposite in the sense that it wasn't saving someone's life; it was to uh, sort of like a human shield is a way to describe it, or soft diplomacy is another way. Um, but it because I'd had those two things in in within a year, it I was an absolute nervous wreck as far as um, trusting anyone or believing. Like, so anytime someone would ask me to help them with something, I wouldn't know whether they're telling me the truth or not, or whether they had ulterior motives, or whether they were putting me in danger. So, I mean, this is really serious, heavy stuff. Um, and it all happened in a 4 year period, over a 4 year period. And uh, it caused me to give up. And I ended up drinking a lot. I gave up on making music. I'd had um, a chance to do something with my music, and because of the trauma, I just it became too much, and this is only like half the things that happened in those 4 years. So it was like I was in a constant state of fear. And a big underlying aspect to all this was manipulation, coercion, being lied to, also being threatened. I had threats made to me at times. Being exposed to wrongdoings and dastardly deeds. Um, at the end of all this, I was an absolute nervous wreck, and I failed, or I couldn't function for a few years. So I hope I wasn't. I mean, I try not to just go on about my stuff, but if it's constructive to hear someone talk about what it is, what causes complex trauma, is its ongoing events that are serious, that are threatening. So um, some of these things that happened to me in my life, I did fear for my own life because of it, and that's why I talk about it now in very generalized terms. I don't talk about details. Um, and essentially, I'm moving on from this, and so I want to make that constructive. That this was a start. That I was explaining that I had this. It seemed like it never ended, and but so the points I made for the chat was starting again over and over, and that's something that I've had to do. So um, after I had the car accident at work, I started again, and I started working for myself. And I have sort of talked about this a bit, but I was given handyman sort of odd jobs to do, which gave me an opportunity to regroup. And that's when I was also being really creative with my art and making music. Um, and essentially, because I've been processing this stuff, and that last example that I used, where I was essentially used as an intelligence asset for a private intelligence operation. It sounds crazy, but it's what happened, and it was essentially saving someone's life who themselves had been threatened with their own life. But what was traumatizing and for me was the fact that I wasn't asked, I would have agreed to it, but to do it, it but I wasn't. So I was used as a what they call a useful idiot, or an asset, um, or a human shield. There's lots of names for the way these things. Um, so when I found out and was given acknowledgement and proof that this is what was going on, I dissociated, and then things went downhill for several years. So I have just gone through letting go of that, and that's essentially what happened even today, is that I had this, you know, a constructive way to explain this is that, you know, um, letting someone know how much it really hurt you, and understanding and empathizing with it, and that's what I did. So I said, the way I was used in this situation really affected me and scared me and caused me a lot of pain. And I said it was a major betrayal, because it was. But what I did say was that if I was asked to do this, I would have agreed to do it, because um, I wouldn't have got hurt in the process. And it was saving someone's life, literally saving someone's life, who was being threatened, um, in a way that um, they would have their life taken away from them. But it was traumatic for me because I didn't have the choice, and I found out about it halfway through the process, and I that level of betrayal, because I'd just gone through it, that a year, less than a year, or about a year previous. Yeah, just almost a year. So it took me a long time, and then so I'm sorry. I really went on about that stuff, but these things happen to people. You know, these things really do happen to people, and I didn't get hurt physically in any of these things, but I was emotionally, psychologically damaged by them. And so today, okay, so in the points I made for today was starting again over and over, and this is something that I'm having to do all the time, and become accustomed to that, and that can be a strength. It's like the at the start. where I use the analogy of someone who starts farming a field, giving giving them that opportunity to, well, they have a drive to do something, and then it fails, and all their crops destroyed. You don't you start again, and you learn from it, and over time that's how you become a farmer, and you have a bountiful harvest. Um, so accepting that is a big part of healing, because it's going to happen over and over. You're going to have setbacks, and it you might have had to restart your life over and over already. But to expect that things will just suddenly get better and you'll never have to do that again is completely false. You know, it's essentially what you have to deal with always. But you keep sticking to it and keep building up your knowledge and strength. Eventually, you'll have a bountiful harvest, and that makes up for the years where you had nothing and you were starving, and you worked yourself tirelessly. Um, I've got to go check on Mum. Dad was supposed to be back, and he's not back yet, so I've got to go check on Mum. So if you can give me a few minutes, but I've finished what I was talking about with that stuff, and I want to go through the points now that are constructive. Okay, I'm back. Everything's fine. I had to do that, and I'm sorry. It's I was put in this situation where I made it very clear that one night a week I do this. I went through a thing today where um, I was formally forgiving someone for what I consider a major trauma in my life that essentially caused me to spend 3 years. Um, and it wasn't just that; it was all those things. And then so um, Dad was meant to be home, and he's not home. Um, so the point I was trying to make was like, I'd be grateful for what you have. I am grateful for what I have. Like I've got food, shelter. I've got opportunity for life again. I can start again, and I know that I have to keep starting again. And I know that it's just going to keep happening over and over. So even once you learn to become a farmer and you get a bountiful harvest, the next year it could be drought, or it could be um, a, a, a thunderstorm and hail could just wipe out your whole crop, or a flock of birds come through, or insects come through, and they wipe everything out. So you have to understand that, be prepared for these things to just be part of life. Um, and I am so grateful for what I have, you know. Um, the next bit was the unresolved and the unresolvable. And so what I did today was to try and resolve something that had been there for so long. And I did that through communication. And I did that in a way that um, I thought was going to resolve this situation. And I was denied that, as if it was an accident. And it further complicated my opportunity to. I've got to go check again. So any sound I hear, I have to go check. And I'm sorry this is disrupting this, but this is my role, and I can't not. This is amazing, because this is exactly the thing. The reason why I spoke about everything earlier was because of this is what happened today. Is I actively went through a forgiving, letting go process today, and it was sabotaged through accident. And um, so what I did is um, I left a note for someone to read that explained my needs and concerns, and really gave me the opportunity to speak and have my say. That's a big thing. When you've been hurt by a situation, having your needs being heard is a big path to healing. And so that's what I did. That was disrupted. So I clarified that this is what I did. I left a message for someone, and then it was disrupted. And then I spent the whole afternoon upset, because I thought I did the right thing, because I was actually, this was part of the forgiving and letting go. And it came back to me that it hadn't happened. And so I then had to go through the process of going through it again, which I did. And hopefully it has been received. I have forgiven, but I made it clear how much this thing affected me, and also that I understand, I can empathize with those within this situation. And I think that's something that can be replicated or understood by other people, in these delicate, complex situations. And so I thought I did the right thing, and then I had to actually fix it, you know. And I think have done that, and I've made myself clear. I spoke. I feel better now for doing so. Um, there are things that you seek to resolve, and there also are things that are unresolvable, and that can be a pain and a trauma in itself, because it doesn't matter what you try and do, you can never. I mean, you can't fix things, but you can at least make amends or find peace, or or find a middle ground between two parties. Sometimes things are unresolvable, and that is really painful. And in a sense, any form of major trauma is unresolvable, because you've gone through it and you can't get your time back. You can't go back in time and fix it. So it's how you deal with it moving forward is a big thing. And so what was frustrating for me today is I actively spoke, made my myself clear, and then it was accidentally thwarted. Sorry, I'm thinking of the word, but it was interrupted, and I then had to go into a crisis mode. And how do I fix this? And so I went through the process of um, explaining clearly what I was trying to do and trying to express, and to empathize with the other party. So this is very real and recent, that this is something that I've had to deal with literally this afternoon, and it's still going on. Um, but I think it's resolved in a way. I really do think it's resolved. Um, Fears I have to trust again are big barriers that prevent me from establishing new friendships. Um, Trusting again is a big thing. how do you do that when you've been manipulated and coerced and lied to so many times? Not just on a simple, trivial things, serious, major things. And so the next point was like shifting focus on no, from no to yes. And so um, not getting stuck in the negative. You know, it's it's hard not to either be negative or feel the negative or act in the negative. Um, but you don't want to contribute to it. So shifting and changing the mindset is such a difficult thing. Um, and I think it's a big part of reframing the way you can approach things, and that maybe can help moving forward for the future. Is that once you do that, you can um, well, for starters, you're not trapped and bound by these things that are no longer there. So you're not creating your own self-imposed prolonging. You're not prolonging the agony because you've you know. For me, forgiveness is not an easy thing, and it's very painful. But once you do actually do it, it can work. Um, and that shifting that focus is such a difficult thing, because um, you're overwhelmed with these things. Especially with emotional abuse. I mean, it's hard to not compare trauma, but um, it closes you off. It shuts you down. So you have to learn to open up again. You have to learn to trust. Even if you can't trust, you have to give faith in the chance that people aren't going to hurt you. And so that was leads into the next point, which was boundaries and not barriers. So having boundaries, setting up boundaries, creating boundaries, and sticking to those boundaries. You have to be really firm with this, but you don't want the boundaries to be barriers. You know, it's better to have the boundary to be something that's like an imaginary fence, not a physical fence. Like you don't want to close yourself in so much you can't escape yourself. You can't travel freely yourself. And that's a big problem I've had is often when I set up boundaries, I do it in the wrong way. Um, they're not actually boundaries where I'm making sure people don't cross this into my space in and to interfere with my own personal um, not like way of life necessarily, but my own personal sovereignty or self respect, self worth. Um, but if those boundaries aren't set up right, they're barriers. They're keeping you inside. you're locked within your own boundaries. And so you have to have vulnerability to allow people to get close. But you can't make it so that you can't escape yourself freely, you know. So I'll give you an example. I have such social anxiety because of um, emotional and psychological abuse. I isolate myself from people, and I don't open myself up for having relationships, meeting new people. You know, I'm getting to do this here, which is really great. I can't express more how much I appreciate getting to know and have support and share experiences with people on this medium. Um, but in my physical day to day world, I've closed myself off. So I've created boundaries that are barriers. So I have to tear those barriers down and still keep boundaries. And so, how do I do that? I have to change the way I behave. So, um, instead of me shutting myself away and not going out in public, I will go out in public. That's what I'm aiming to do, you know. But in order to do that, I have to have boundaries. So, um, having suffered not just um, the manipulation and coercion effects, those sorts of abuse, I've also had a lot of bullying and being treated badly. So I can create a boundary that's not a barrier by still going out and giving people the chance and the opportunity to not hurt me by making it clear to someone if they do. So how do you do that? You let them know they've crossed your boundaries. So if someone is abusive towards you or is rude or dismissive, you say to them, I won't be treated that way. I won't be spoken to that way. I don't deserve this treatment. But you don't not go anywhere because of it. And that's what's happened to me is that I've shut myself off to protect myself. So I haven't made boundaries. You know, I've made barriers. So what I have to do is change that whole thing, you know. And this happened incrementally because over time I would still not suffer from that, you know. I would always I like to think that I do give people the opportunity to um, I'm not wanting to project that negativity outwards. So that's a big shift of focus I have to do is tear down these walls and you know it's like I've planted um, thickets of thorny vines all around my house to keep everyone out. you know. But what it means is whenever I want to try and move around, I'm the one who's getting stuck. I'm the one trapped, you know. And that's the same as, you know, you think of building big walls to surround your city to protect yourself. But by doing so, you're actually um, imprisoning yourself. So a better way to do it is to not have these big walls. You know, you might still need a castle, right? But the whole thing doesn't have to be fortified. The, you know, so that leaves you vulnerable. So you're open to attack. So how do you deal with that? You deal with it as it arises. So if I have social anxiety from harassment and abuse, when someone harasses or abuses me, I need to call them out, you know, but in a way that you're not escalating. And I'm learning how to do this. So if someone says something that's really deeply offensive, I'm learning to say, express. You have to express your emotions and your feelings and your needs, you know, and then that way they can hear what you're saying, you know. But if the response is, oh, you're just rude, you're an asshole, you're a loser for treating me like this, um, that's not going to help anything. Or so something that could help would be to say, look, you know, um, I do feel upset by the way you're treating me, and I need to feel safe and know that I can exist and interact without having these situations, you know. And then the other person can be like, well, uh, they realize what they're doing. But as soon as you place judgment on them or blame them, you know, or try and ask for a solution, the solution should happen itself. And if you can express your what you're feeling, people can't help but hear it. But if you're not expressing what your feelings and needs are, they have no idea and they can't respond to it. So if someone is treating you improperly, it's going to go nowhere. If you put judgment on them or blame them, so the boundaries have to be by tearing the boundaries down. No, by the tearing the barriers down, you're keeping boundaries by being assertive as to how you deal with these situations as they arise. And it's a difficult thing, and it's something that's taking me a long time to learn. You know, next point was motivation by surrender, and that sort of is how this works. Is things will naturally progress and thrive, and stagnation will disappear once essentially you have to surrender to allowing the situation to not exist. It sounds strange, but you can create the situation just by thinking about it or projecting it. It's like being nervous around someone. They'll treat you with suspicion. If you presume people are going to hurt you, then it's going to make it more likely that they are going to hurt you. So you still have to protect yourself, but it can be done in a way where, if in order to, you have to have a certain amount of vulnerability in order for things to happen in a positive way. And that goes for yourself as much as it goes for others. So when you project your own self-doubt, you're creating a negative cycle within yourself. So it makes it easier for yourself to then doubt yourself. So just don't doubt. Now, it's not like you still have to be smart about these things. You can't just go, well, I'm not going to lock all the doors of my house and not expect someone to rob it. That might happen, or it might not. But so it's okay to lock everything up, but don't feel like it. Don't if you close everything off, it's you're projecting that out, and it happens internally as well. So then you go back and go, well, I never went and did all these things because I was too afraid, and it was myself creating that scenario. With this, then you have resistance from other people. So as soon as you try and change your behavior, people will notice it, and they will then act accordingly. They might apply more pressure towards you. So there'll be more resistance. So you have to then not add to that. I do have to check again. I've just heard some noise. I know Dad's back, but give me 1 minute. I just want to thank everyone for like sticking around that haven't left, because I've been taking these breaks, but they're not breaks. I just have just had disruptions tonight. So resistance and um, there's always going to be naysayers or people trying to prevent you from achieving what you want to achieve. And this can be from achieving goals, but it's also to do with healing. So from my own perspective is, because I've been in such a state for so long, almost my whole life. Um, People presume that I'm never going to succeed. So I've got enough trouble dealing with my own self doubt and self sabotage, and then when I'm actively positive about personal development and positive growth, um, I, I then face resistance from others because they don't believe that, you know, it's possible. And so how do you respond to that? And it's the same thing again internally. We are our own worst enemies when it comes to um, creating our own barriers and resistance against change or growth or healing. And it, it's a very difficult thing to actually grasp. Um, so what I've found with people, when um, you see resistance from others, first off, think they're not. Not really what they think. That's just their automatic reaction. So people will have an automatic reaction to say, "Oh no, not possible. You'll never succeed." Um, they haven't even given it any thought. That's just their automatic first off reaction. So disregard that initial reaction. Don't let that stifle you or put you off where you're wanting to go. And you know, just because, like for instance, it could be like, oh, trying to quit cigarettes. You try so many times, um, and then you tell someone, oh, quit cigarettes, and they'll be like, oh, don't, you'll be back smoking in a week. So just because you failed so many times doesn't mean you're not going to succeed this time. And it gives their negative perception then gives you the opportunity to then doubt yourself. So it makes it easier to then, and then you have an excuse. You have an excuse because you can say, oh, well, they didn't believe in me anyway. So um, understand the first reaction, and that this also goes to the same for positive growth. You're trying to start something new, and then someone says, oh, that'll never work. Don't listen to them. It's just their natural first off. They can't help it. If it persists, let that be a guiding principle. Let that be the impetus for you to actually succeed. Not to prove them wrong. It doesn't have to be to prove them wrong, but it can just be the thing that gives you the strength, that just because people don't believe you're capable doesn't mean you are not capable. So you can still, that that you can use it as a thing to say, well, I'm going to do this despite what they say, not I'm going to do this to prove them wrong. By saying, I'm going to, do this to prove them wrong would be to create an expectation, and then gives you the ability then to doubt. So the best thing is to just not acknowledge it at all. So appreciate people's opinion. You could say, oh, I've got this great idea for this thing I want to do. And the first thing someone says is, oh, that's a silly idea, or you'll never make it. Appreciate them saying that. You understand it's either their innate reaction, they can't help themselves, or maybe they have their own insecurities. But don't even judge them. Don't overthink it. Just appreciate the fact that there is that resistance, and don't feed into it. But it's actually a sign that you're onto it, that you're onto something. Like, if your idea or your plan is so silly, then you'll know that yourself. So have faith in yourself and believe in yourself, and understand expectations are better. Like, dream big. Have for me, my goal is to heal completely from the complex trauma. That's a massive thing. But I also think of it in a realistic sense, where I know that it's going to take a long time. It's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to have to happen in stages. And there are going to be setbacks. But I'm still dreaming big, you know. And then, so the last point was persistence and adaptation. And so that sort of sums it all up, is that, you persist within yourself. Doesn't matter how many times you fail, just keep trying. When you try, you don't succeed. You only succeed when you accomplish. But that doesn't mean stop trying, because you don't know if you're going to succeed or not. But if you go into a situation where you try, you're already failing. But understand that it is part of the aspect of accomplishment is going through failures. And this is a very hard thing. This is where the resistance comes in, is that, with your own resistance and other people's resistance against believing in you. And adaptation. So listening, and that's that whole thing about, you might fail, but then you learn how it didn't succeed, so you try something different. And because you try something different, that doesn't succeed, but eventually you'll find the solution, through persistence. and you don't want to work yourself to the bone, or you don't want to spend all your money, and like it's very easy to make mistakes and fail because of that. And you could look at healing in the same way as you could look at starting a business. You know, if you go about it the wrong way, it's doomed to fail from the start. If you adapt every time that there is something that doesn't work, find another way to do it, or find another way to do the same thing, or find something different. But it has to be, it like, it has to align with the outcome or the end goal of being where you want to be. And often you arrive to that position without realizing that it was something completely different to what you ever thought was going to be the way that you got to there. And I think this is a combination of the two things, is persistence and adaptation. So, you persist with regular things, basic mundane things. And you also, when things don't work, you adapt, you change. And eventually you get to where you want to go. And so that's what I found with healing, as where I've gotten to now, is because of that. I tried things, they failed. So I adapt, I change it a bit. But I don't give up on them until I've exhausted the fact that I know that they don't work. And this is another big thing that goes back to what I was saying about the naysayers and people trying to dissuade you, is that, you don't necessarily know what the magic solution is until you actually get to that. And then you can work backwards. But everyone's case is different. Everyone's scenario is different. So how do you resolve that? Educate yourself as much as you can. But then you don't want to have to, you don't try everything. Try things that, try a lot of things. Another example is, throw, rather than planting all your plants in rows, and they're all one type of plant, you can throw out just seed into the garden willy-nilly and just see what pops up. And the things that thrive, then you can go, oh, well, look, that worked. And then you think about, why did that work? Why did that plant grow there and the other ones didn't? And then you can go, well, it was because the sunlight, or the shade, or the fact that it was growing next to another plant. So having multiple things and then adapting to it. So, but persistence, keep going, even when you have setbacks. Just keep going. Sometimes these setbacks can last for months. As long as you're not going so far backwards that it's dangerous for you, then think of these things as part of persistence. You know, it's not like you have to keep walking every day. You need to have days where you rest. Sometimes you get lost and you have to backtrack before you can find your way around. So I think I've talked about everything. Um, and like, I think I'll be able to catch up on the comments pretty quickly. It's great. I did notice the comments going through, and people were listening, and I hope I was able to be coherent and um, so Sky says, hey Luke. Resonant Reflection says, awesome. Michaela says, hello. Hello to all you. All. Sky says, I had a huge scare before. My cat had gone missing, but I found him. Oh, that's really good to know that your cat's back again. Things like that just frighten the life out of you, don't they? Like, and especially this time of night. Lashna says, man, I'm sorry. Yeah, look, I was at the beginning, I was talking about some heavy stuff, and I'm sorry about that. But it was in context to today. And the point of this chat was talking about resolving things. So I hope it was resolved. I haven't had contact back yet. You know, maybe I don't need to. I communicated what I needed to say. To me, it feels like I resolved something today. That was for a long time. Yeah, 8 years it's been there. This particular thing. Michaela says, "Yeah, I'm glad you found your cat." Yeah, I am glad too. They tend to go missing at twilight and dusk, and then Sky says having CPTSD and BPD traits heightens my anxiety, which makes me overreactive when I'm stressed. That's a really good comment. Thank you for being open about speaking about that. Absolutely, those it all interconnects, doesn't it? And I will fluctuate between hyper arousal and hypo arousal. Most of the time, I shut down and I can't deal with it. What happens to me is I'll get the overreacting happening, but it'll be internal, and so people don't always see it, but I'm feeling it and I'm thinking it and I'm living, and it's painful, you know. But certainly the anxiety, I think anxiety is a common thing that we have from the CPTSD. and then you know, um, so that's yeah. I get overreactive when I'm in that stress state prolonged. Like I'll get if when I get overreactive, that's when I'll be agitated, and it can last for a long period of time. It can be like that for weeks, and I'm irritable, and I don't like speaking to people because everything, you know, everything is too much. Um, Lashna says, you feel okay to go on to 50 or 5D. What's 5D? The fifth dimension? I'm keen to like ascend to a high dimension. Sky says, thanks, Michaela. That's awesome you found your cat. Lashna says, the future has to be safe. You seem likable but safe. Children. That's an interesting comment. I'm trying to sort of um, yeah, I think the future has to be safe. You know, um, I look at what happened to me as a child, and there were no safeguards. There were no protections. Um, I, yeah, I'm really angry about how there was, and I don't know if it is safer today or not. Is it? Basic glitch is here. How you going, basic glitch? Good to see you here. Basic glitch says hi. Have a nice day. Um, but yeah, I'm still trying to work out what that comment meant last night. Because yeah, I feel safe. I'm I um, I don't have anyone I'm responsible for, so I did fear for my life because of stuff that I experienced. Um, Maybe that prevented me from um, being in a better situation, and that's why I'm stuck in it now, and I want to move past that. So Michaela says, Luke, you're super thoughtful, but you're not responsible for anyone else's feelings. you can just speak freely and let each of us deal with our own emotions. That's thank you. That's good to know. And yeah, that does make me feel better. And look, it's like someone said. I forget who said it recently. Someone said, "Don't think about what people think. Think about what they feel." And that was Australiana made, and I think that was really great shift of focus for me. Um, once you empathize with someone, um, somehow you are able to understand better what they're going through, rather than getting caught up in what you think that they think about you or what they're thinking. So it really does change a lot. Lesnar says yes. This guy says, I'm not doing very well mentally at the moment. I'm sorry to hear that. I've I've had a few rough days this week myself, but it sounds like you're if you want to talk about it, like, we're here for you. Because it does get overwhelming, Sky. And know that there's, you got Blue Knot out there. You can give him a call. Um, you can send me an email if you ever want to speak. You want someone to just chat to. Um, it can be overwhelming. Like, it's good to advise things to do. So when you're overwhelmed, try and calm it. Like, that's easier said than done. But you're reaching out now. You're speaking about it. So that's taking a really big step. Saying there's a lot of stuff going on, and um, I think you know I I think you're a strong person for dealing with so much, but you're also acknowledging what you've gone through, and so things get overwhelming at this point when you have so much going on. Uh, it opens up more and more stuff, and that's when you get overwhelmed. So, Sky says, "I'm here to listen, Luke. Thank you." Um, got a book recommendation, so I'll write this down. Michaela says, "Book recommendation: Man's Search for Meaning." Viktor Frankl. Yeah, I've heard a lot about Viktor Frankl. He was the fellow who was in the concentration camp, and I've been referred to read his book, Man's Search for Meaning. One thing, this is off topic. I want to clear this up now, and I'll probably have to. I think it'd be a good topic for discussion. Is that someone said it in the comments in a recent video, and they just said, hurt people hurt others. And yes, people that have been hurt others. But I believe that the vast majority of people who have been hurt do not continue the cycle of violence. I believe that that most people, it's only a very small number of people that are hurt continue on hurting. And it's a misconception. And what that does is it falsely blames and stigmatizes people who are victims. And that's something that has hurt me a lot, because growing up, it was this thing. People would say, oh, people who are abused go on to abuse. No, they don't. Some do, but most don't. Most, like, they don't. It's only some that do, and that some that do are responsible for the greater amount of harm to others. Because if it was the case that everyone did that, the world would be stuffed completely. So it's because people most often have been hurt, don't go on to hurt others. So I just wanted to say that. And I think that's something that needs to be said more often, and more trust needs to be put into people who are victims of abuse, physical, sexual, emotional, whatever it is that it's actually victimizing people who've been hurt to actually make it worse for them. And yes, when someone is found to have abused someone in whatever way, almost most likely, almost in every situation, that person has been badly hurt themselves. But if it was if it was the case that, just because you were hurt doesn't mean you're going to hurt others, that's false. Now, people that are hurt will hurt themselves, so they'll self-harm, or they'll abuse alcohol and drugs. So they will hurt themselves that way, but they won't hurt others. What you'll find is the best people who come from violent backgrounds or abusive backgrounds go on to be the most loving, caring people. But we live in a world where there are a lot of psychopaths and narcissists and sociopaths that persistently go out there and hurt people. But they are outnumbered by people that do good. I hope that makes sense. That's my and it just wouldn't. It's, to me, it's a stigma. It's a stigmatization that's placed on people. And what it does is it makes people afraid to actually speak out about the abuse that they've suffered, because there's this thing where people say people that are hurt. That's true. They do that. But percentage wise, it's only a small number that go on to perpetuate the violence or abuse, and that it's a false stigmatization, and that most people who have been abused are the opposite. So I just wanted to, that was my thing I just wanted to say. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. I've been told by several people I really need to read that book, and how his attitude was really amazing, how he was able to survive the concentration camps. And like the main thing was that they could take everything away from him, but like one thing they couldn't take away was his own self-dignity. So thanks for that book recommendation, Michaela. Lashna says 3 tulips, 4 ferns, and a cedar tree. That's awesome. I don't know what that means, or is that a book recommendation as well? But it just sounds cool. That sounds like a recipe for like a beautiful garden. Emin Bells is here. How you going, Emin Bells? Good to see you here. Emin Bells says hi, everyone. Jessica's here as well. Good to see you again, Jessica. It was nice having a chat with you the other day. Jessica says, I'm sorry you've been struggling, Sky. Yeah, I'm sorry too. We're here for you, Sky. Like, just it's okay to struggle, and to be overwhelmed. Just know that there's support out there, and things do get difficult, and sometimes, weeks go by and you feel like you've not been able to accomplish anything. But, you look back and you go, you were processing things, your body was telling you needed to heal. Jessica says, I'm here to listen to. I caught a video the other day just scrolling, and a lot of stuff I was hearing sparked my interest, hoping to gather some info to help with my own stuff too. That's awesome. Jessica says, I'm more than grateful and lucky for all I have. It's hard. However, at times when so much bad has happened throughout life, where it doesn't feel so hard and sad and heavy. That is difficult when you have that combination of experiences. So there's periods of calm and safety and peace. And Resonant Reflection says, you're doing well. It's understandable, and don't worry about having to check. Thank you, Resonant Reflections. I sort of I did get to speak about some painful, heavy stuff, without going into the details. And Jessica says, the best thing in my life, I wanted to be a mum, and I have three beautiful, smart, funny children who are my everything. That's awesome. They're the only reason for anything anymore. I thought about trying hypnotherapy to help. That's awesome. You got to be a parent. I wish I got to be a parent. I think I'd be the best father, and I'd teach them how to protect themselves, because I think that's one thing that parents should do, is to teach their children to protect themselves from everything. Bullies, narcissists, predators, um, thieves. There's so many dangers in the world. So like if there's, but I guess one of the most difficult thing being a parent is you don't want to put paranoia into your child or make them fearful of everything. But I think it's better to actually make them aware so that they don't get hurt. Um, Jessica says, you're so brave. Thank you so much. I get this courage from everyone's support. So people like you helping me. Michaela says, you're not obliged to empathize with people who abuse you. That's true. Yeah. I guess when I sort of say that, I don't necessarily mean to fully empathize with them, but to somehow understand. But yeah, absolutely. That's a really good comment. There's no obligation at all. Like people that abuse you don't they don't deserve much for what they've done. The damage. Um, Jessica says, you're becoming an inspiration to me. I'm thankful I've found your video. Thank you, Jessica. Um, Jessica says, it's so hard. It is, yeah. She continues, when I experience extreme pain, I feel like a burden and I end up pushing everyone away. I can totally get that. I do the same. I'm so thankful to have found your content. This stuff is hitting so hard, me so hard. So many of these things resonate. It's good to know that, see, I can't, I'm just saying my experience. So, you know, I know that I've failed at so many things, you know, and I have regrets, but I've learned through this pain. Even today, what happened today, like, was a disaster, and I had to sort it out, and it was painful to sort it out. So, um, I really appreciate that you're getting stuff out of this. That um, Are you sure's here? How you going? Are you sure? It's good to see you back again. We had a good chat again as well the other day. Says, I've been struggling with CPTSD, and this live chat is healing. applying boundaries will bring out the other's true colors. Absolutely. Thank you for your comment and praise. I, I, you know, hearing stuff like that is just means so much to me, to know that it gives me a reason to keep doing it. And you know, I, it is the struggle is such a difficult thing. Is that I get so many things that are working in my life, and so many things that are just not going anywhere. So it's um, I'm working on it, and so I don't have the answers, and I think we all have to work out what works for us in the end. But it helps hearing from someone else's perspective, and like um, so I appreciate what you said there, and applying boundaries will bring out other people's true colors. It really will. As soon as you put up boundaries, it people react straight away. Some people just don't know how to deal with it, especially if you haven't had any boundaries in the previously. As soon as you start putting them up, it freaks some people out because they just don't know how to deal with it. Aisha says, after years in and out of depression, I traded my authenticity for a sense of false safety. That's a really interesting comment, because you sort of have to do that, don't you, to make things easier. One thing I found out with that is that it, it does set you up for being hurt more. Um, so I guess I'm authentically open to and trusting, or have been, and then it's set me up for people to hurt me. Um, Jessica says, how do you quiet doubt? That's an interesting one. Or even doubt from others. I struggle letting others push stuff or make me feel, I don't know, confused. It's hard. And now I wonder who I trust, who can I trust their words or have been true. Yeah, totally. Um, it's doubt, for self doubt, the inner critic, all that stuff's massive for me. Like low self esteem, self sabotage at times. But self doubt is a massive thing, and for me, I always go back to my self doubt comes from other people's doubt, and that goes back to, I think, maybe what Michaela was saying, was just don't care about what other people think. And that's a big thing. So if you're not caring about what other people think, it's going to mean you're not going to doubt yourself as much. Because for me, my doubt comes from other people um, having not believing in me. So and at the same time, I might still have a lot of self confidence, and people say, "Oh, I can't believe it. You've got all this self confidence. You achieve all this stuff," and it's like, yeah, but the whole time I'm doubting myself. So it's such a difficult thing. And how do you quiet that? How do you, it's don't listen to it is one thing. So like let it be, and eventually it'll wear itself out. But it's always going to be there. And the worst thing about the doubt is that it'll pop up right when you need reassurance. So um, it's it's easy to say, oh, just believe in yourself. Um, because that's not easy to do. And if you do, just say, I believe in myself, but then you might still have the doubt. So it's not, you're not fully believing in yourself. You're only sort of saying you are. The doubt is still there. Um, for me, other people's reactions to me, negative reinforcement affects me, and then I then internalize that, and um, then I'm once I've internalized it, then I'm actually feeding it and then keeping it going. So um, uh, quietening the doubt is, in some ways, knowing that you can, like, look back and think about what you have achieved and what you have persevered through, and that can help. Jessica says, awesome. Michaela says, it can be helpful to tell yourself that what other people think about you is none of your business. Quietly do the thing and try to get outside validation. That's exactly it. And I think that's a perfect point. That's answering the question, you know. So and you have to remind yourself. So tell yourself that what other people think about you is none of your business. Really, it shouldn't matter. Quietly do the thing and try and let go of outside validation. See, that's another thing I have trouble with, is validation, seeking validation from others. And so I'll get stuck in that. And expecting to get validation from others, and it never arrives. And then you get let down. And that also then feeds the self doubt, because um, if you're expecting that validation and you're not going to get it, then you're setting yourself up for a failure. So not be purposefully choosing not to care, like don't care at all, you know. um, give yourself, like, credit, give yourself um, things to attain, like or to aspire to. So it's good to be a critic of yourself, but not a, a bad critic. So give yourself praise when you achieve, but don't scorn yourself when you don't achieve or when you fail, um, because you already know that anyway. So you don't have to reinforce it. So then, like, if as long as you're aware, like, of course, like, it's easy to be aware of when things don't work out. So Jessica says, I appreciate that. It does apply to my situation fully. It's hard to explain my whole situation. Jessica says, yep. Jessica says my comment shouldn't have said doesn't apply. Yeah, no, that's it. Australiana mates here. Awesome to see you, Australiana. I really love your comment you made the other day. I really thought about it and it gave me a lot to think about, shifting focus and perspective and stuff. I really do appreciate it. Australiana says, "G'day, you're a gem. Sweet dreams. Keep your shit together, folks. If our bowels can do it, the rest can." Lol. Oh, I'm gonna write that down. That's got to be the best. I haven't heard a quote like that for ages. That's awesome. Keep your shit together. If your bowels can do it, if our bowels can do it. The rest can. I had to write that one down. That's such a great comment. Keep your shit together, folks. If our bowels can do it, the rest can. Lol. Emma Bell says, "Yeah, Jessica, I noticed a few comments just disappeared. There's no mod here. Strange." Oh, sometimes people some people you can retract your own comments. I think that's what happens. Sometimes people might make a comment and then they remove it automatically. So I don't know what the story is with that M Bells. That's interesting, but I have noticed that a few times. But also have noticed that people you can retract your own comment. So like sometimes people might say something and then they don't. They might not want it to stay there. So you're absolutely right. We don't have a moderator here, and hopefully we don't have to have a moderator for a long time because the comments here or the chats are really peaceful and generally we don't have troubles with them with anyone. So Australiana says Australiana mate says there's a dude who talks about big T and little t, and it pertains often to the sensitivity of people, how deeply we are affected. Read Papillion. So I'll look that up. Papillion. That's it. Michaela says I've removed a few of my own comments. That might be what it is. Jessica says I had a typo. I didn't know anything about the mods. I've just been watching videos on healing. Yeah, no, that's it. Trusting and believing. Yeah, that's it. We don't have a mod here, and hopefully we don't have to get to the point where we need one. We've only never really had any troubles. And I really like how the chats happen here. They sort of just happen, and we don't know where. Like tonight's been really good. Like we're talking about the topic of helping ourselves and learning to do things better and letting go of like inhibitions with um like guilt and shame and lots of things. Been really good chat. Are you sure says self-awareness has opened my eyes to Cassandra syndrome. It hurts because I believed that it was a fault. I'll look that up. I've never heard of Cassandra syndrome. That's what I love about these chats is I always, we share ideas and what we do. So it's such a powerful medium to like get referral to read a book, or a particular YouTube channel is really good, or it's really powerful. Jessica says, I'm glad I caught some of this while my house was quiet. These streams and sleep sounds are helping. Let's keep paying and growing and trusting signs and ourselves. That's a really good comment, Jessica. Like, that's awesome. That's uplifting and confidence building, that really is. That I'll read that one again just because that's, um, I mean, let's keep paying and growing and listening to signs in ourselves. Yeah, becoming self-aware. That's like what Are You Sure was saying. Self-awareness is a big thing, listening to reading your thoughts, listening to your emotions, feeling your body and your emotions, becoming aware of the social dynamics of situations. It all helps. Like, you become, the more active you become, like, so there's passive and active awareness, as the observer. And so, you need to, if you're not doing any of that, then you're not even awake. You're allowing things to just happen, and years can go by in your life where you're like, I wish I did this. Why wasn't I doing this and working on this? And it's because it's something you have to practice and keep doing. Saying that, it is nice to actually just switch off, and tune out and let things happen. But when you do that for too long, you miss opportunities and priorities. Jessica says, all working towards. Yeah, that's it. So that's the thing, is the goals we're working towards. Ashna says, it does not matter, only the creator matters. That's it. Like, that's a really good, and that's, so put yourself in the center. So if you put yourself in the center as the creator, that's the only thing that matters. You matter. But also, if you look at a situation, whether you're part of that situation or not, you can look at it and go, who is the creator or the protagonist within the situation? And then that then allows you to differentiate meaning and levels of responsibility. So in an ideal world, everyone would be like the creator, or and but that doesn't happen. Often you might have one or a few people who are um, central. If that makes sense. But it certainly is something to consider. I've missed that comment before Australiana made. It says, angry people hurt others, full stop. I agree with you, Luke. That's it. Thank you, Australiana made. The and I didn't write, when I wrote down Papillion, I didn't write big T and little t. Yeah, I really wanted to make that point because that's something always growing up. Is I didn't want to, like, you don't want to tell people, oh, look, I've been molested. It's not nice to say it, and you don't want to bring up wounds. You don't want to change people's perceptions and stuff like that. But on top of all that, you have that perception that was always growing up. I grew up in the 80s when there wasn't safeguards for children in a lot of things. Um, and that is what led to two of my situations. One was being physically harmed, and the other one was being sexually harmed, and they were within a environment where you would hope to think that there was accountability and protective systems in place, but none of that existed. But then also at the same time in the 80s, 90s, it just kept being drummed into us. They keep saying, oh, people that abuse were abused themselves. Yes. And same thing with, the cycle of violence. It's a real thing, but it stops at the individual that chooses not to continue it. And, that's why in the world, it is such a safe world, because so many people don't perpetuate it. And it's a stigma, that people have. And then so I didn't want to tell people for a long time that I'd been abused, because it was seen as a thing that is negative. That's Michaela says it's also an excuse for abusers. Exactly. It's like that's a really good comment. It is used within the court system to allow bad people to get away with horrible crimes, is because it's like said, oh, well, this person was badly abused, and it's like, it's overused, that, you know. Michaela continues, my ex tried to blame his atrocious behavior on his childhood, and I say bullshit. Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. We don't hurt children. That's exactly it. You can tell, like, you know, the level of um, protection there is within society for um, children and for the elderly. I think governing factors on how morally, how moral a society is, how well they treat their children and their elders. And in our society, and I know that um, it's it's a very safe generally, but it's a problem we have, is that we don't, as a society, there isn't enough. Like, we do need to get better at this, and that need I think that needs to be more safeguards, um, less of, like what Michaela was saying, it's no excuse for abusers. I think that's a big thing, that there's not enough accountability. Like, just because you've been abused doesn't mean you can go on and abuse and then get away with it. It should not, like, that's not the, you know, it's on the other, well, not the other side, but like, um, people who have been abused are denied justice and uh, compensation in a lot of cases. And that is an injustice. So, um, that would be, um, by making the laws more stringent and accountability and also liability, if they were increased, that would somehow balance out that whole thing. Because I think people that who were abused and become abusers would actually not go down that path. And from what I understand of the sickness of abusers, is it becomes their life or their way of life, which is really disturbing. So if they were, um, you know, just like criminals, you know, like criminals do the same thing. Like, um, they blame the fact that they were got stuck in the cycle of criminality, and they had no other, that became their life, and they had no other idea about life and living. And it's like, no, man, there's opportunity out there. Go and work. Don't steal. Don't don't be violent. You know, and it's just an excuse. You know. Michaela says, to be fair, some of our elders are monsters. Absolutely, absolutely. Don't I agree with that as well. You know, that they there is that difficulty with that where um, especially narcissistic abuse, um, they rarely reform or get over it. Once someone's pathological narcissist, um, they either tone it back over time, or they actually get worse, or keep it. It's like they've developed it, how to survive and be the narcissist or abuser, and they can keep doing it right up until old age, and in fact become more cunning, and you know they change their tactics of how they attack people as they get older. Whereas um, some narcissists and bullies grow out of it. Some of them actually grow out of it as they grow up. They get a taste of their own medicine, and then they realize how bad it is, and then they start being nicer to people. They might have a mild like tendency towards narcissistic abuse, but then you get the ones who are bad, real bad, and they might be in their 50s, 60s, until it dawns on them that, like, they're criminals. It's like they're con men and criminals, and they get to that point, and it's like they've destroyed every relationship they've ever had. They've burnt all their bridges. They've got no friends, and they may have been successful with businesses and made money, but then they've always had these falling outs and problems because of their narcissistic tendencies will lend them towards disaster. Some will actually like reform later in life. It's like they see the light, they become a light enlightened, and suddenly they change, and it it can be this thing that they get a taste of their own medicine, and they realize no more hurting other people, and they go through, they actually change. So I believe that there's a percentage of narcissists that can't ever change, and then there's a percentage that grow out of it. Like, they might be narcissist, sociopath, psychopath growing up, and then they grow out of it because they have life experiences that force them out of it. And then you have the other percentage that never change, and they manage to get through their whole life, keep dishing out pain and agony on other people. Just like, same thing as you think of them like criminals, like you can have lifelong criminals that get to like a ripe old age, and they're still like the gangster, you know. Yeah, Michaela says they just get worse as they age. That's exactly it. They become more cunning, and they've over the years they've learned all more and more tricks and techniques, and they've learned the psychology of how to manipulate and hurt people from a distance. Lashna says, I think we need a disco ball. That's awesome. That's awesome. Like, and to think of that as the metaphor for the mirror, putting up the mirror, the disco ball's like a way of like just keeping the mirror spinning. So it's reflecting people's actions back in all directions. That's it, mirror, yes. That's it. I love your comment there, Lashna. Are you sure says, I read there are two types of narcissism, grandiose and vulnerable. Yes, I've heard that too. And yeah, and that's it. And you also have the overt and covert narcissist. So it's very interesting because it's there's so many different sort of traits that these people can have. So one of the biggest painful aspects, CPTSD is not in the DSM-5. It'll probably be in the DSM-6. It's in the other World Health Organization book for diagnostic purposes. So as the alternative, they have borderline personality disorder as being the closest thing, but borderline personality disorder is closer to narcissistic personality disorder in a lot of senses. So my thing is the difference between borderline personality disorder and CPTSD is empathy. Like they both share a lot of traits as far as self-sabotage, substance abuse, all these things. But the borderline personality disorder is closer to the narcissistic personality disorder. And other people say borderline personality disorder gets a bad rap and it shouldn't be seen as such a bad thing. And this is the problem with psychological diagnosis being done in the way that it is, that it's like a checklist and they go, yep, got this bit of this, bit of this, bit of this. Yep, this person is this. And this is why there's been so many misdiagnoses of people with mental health conditions that are essentially highly traumatized people. And they're expressing symptoms of other things, but they're not actually those things. They're just an exacerbation of the underlying the trauma. And so we're getting to understand it more, but unfortunately the way that psychiatry and psychology, psychiatry especially with the diagnosis, is that they do get it wrong so much, and there's so much overlap with these things. And even understanding what causes them, like Lashna says, overt, let me help you convert you. Need help? That's it. That's exactly it. yeah, they're trying to actually. I had a, a many years ago a boss that was like admitted to me he was a psychopath, and he was telling me he was trying to toughen me up, teach me how to protect myself against narcissists and psychopaths. And I was like, well, why are you treating me like this to try and make me stronger? And you're actually just putting me through the pain. And for some reason, he thought he was helping me. It was like he was totally overt. But he had the classic example of what I was saying earlier is that his business partner ripped him off, and even though he was the dominant one, his business partner was like somehow outsmarting him. His wife left him. Everything crumbled for him. His whole world just fell in because he pushed everyone away through hurting them. Michaela says a narcissist's behavior can vary in that sphere. Someone who's typically covert can become overt. That's true. And I've seen that. Yeah. They can just like all of a sudden just be like, it's almost like they're got a mask, and then suddenly they're just like the mask is off and they're like intense, they're doing everything at full speed. Because the overt narcissist will tell you what they're doing. They're not afraid. They know it. They're like, in fact, that's part of what they do. They actually tell you. They tell you their plans and what they do, and then that way it clears their conscience when they actually go about attacking and harvesting your energy. It's you know it's such a and it is such an ingrained thing within society. I think narcissism has been normalized within society to the point where it's almost no going back. But I do believe that the world is going to become more empathic and protective of itself. It does require these things, putting up boundaries, but not barriers. You know, we do have to understand that there are, I don't know what the percentage, even if it's 20% of narcissists can be healed, you know, that's pretty good. If you can get that, it'll make the world a better place. And in a lot of ways, they're sad, scared, lonely people, and for some of those, for some of them, that's why they hurt other people, is because it's not. Then you get the psychopathic aspect where they really relish and sadistic sadists that get off on the fact that they're hurting people. You know, so you get the self-aware ones that wish they didn't do it. You know, and try to reform, and some can. Are you sure? Says, yeah, empathy is what differentiates. That's exactly it. Everything seems to overlap. It certainly does, doesn't it? With everything. So, like with the childhood trauma that I suffered caused developmental issues, um, and I know that it caused a form of brain damage with the hypothalamus and the amygdala. And there's another smaller part of the brain that's tucked up in there as well. I can't remember its name, but it also affects your high level thinking as well. It changes the way, and it's the same thing so like that then goes about how you think about mental disorders or conditions as to what are the underlying things. And so um, one school of psychiatry or psychology says it's a chemical imbalance, so the brain's not producing the right chemicals and enzymes and hormones and things. And the other side is also saying then there's developmental. So the brain didn't develop correctly, so it's compensating. And I think it's both of those things, but certainly and that's where the overlap happens massively. And we're still we're still learning. It's always going to be one of those things that we're so far away from really knowing how it all works. But we can feel it, it, and we are learning a lot enough to for instance, I studied mindfulness this year because I want to heal my trauma, and it's one of the most powerful things, and it's had scientific research proving that it can you can rewire your brain with it, and you can thin the hypothalamus and strengthen the amygdala. So you do those two things, and then also rewire your brain at the same time. It's such a powerful thing, and that's not using drugs or anything like that. It's just using the power of thought. Kayla says lack of empathy is the critical problematic feature. That's it. It is. And that's why empathy needs to be taught. It needs to be taught more. That's why I'm really grateful that I got to study nonviolent communication, and I got my last course next week, but they're actually opening it up next year so that we're gonna keep it going once every 2 weeks or a month or something, and practice it. So learning, and I actually was using NVC or nonviolent communication earlier when I was talking about how to think about things. Yeah, it's once I've started to learn it, it's really helped me so much. So I think if someone was a narcissist and they learned nonviolent communication, they would be less of a narcissist. They would learn how to actually empathize, and I think it could be part of that. Michaela says, yeah, your time is better spent educating yourself about narcissism than to try and fix one. I agree as well. Essentially, they have to want, for starters, they have to want to change, and they need to do therapy specifically by someone who is able to reprogram someone who's got narcissistic tendencies. And if someone's fully blown narcissistic personality disorder, it's very hard to actually change them. So some are, you can never change them. You can reform them, just like criminals. They can be reformed, but they have to be kept within um, boundaries so that they're not going to then continue because they can't help themselves. And that's like the pathological ones. Lashna says, yeah, pineal, let's go. That's it, man. That's it. Get the pineal gland growing, and like that's another one. So that's where meditation and stuff like that, that exactly. Michaela says there is a spiritual element. There is, and a lot of people talk about that with narcissists, and it's like they're possessed with um, they're overtaken with this thing, and it's a good way to actually think about a lot of mental issues is in that way. So even if you're a materialist, you can think of those things. I'm going to go on a toilet break, so I'll be back in like 2 minutes. It's a really nice chat tonight. We've most people who have MPD will never seek a diagnostic. Yeah, absolutely. Just won't be. They won't be. They won't be thought about doing that. I'll just avoid it. So been going over 3.5 hours. Might have to end the stream soon. I'm Really appreciative of the chat we've had tonight, and we've had a really constructive conversation. And thanks for bearing with me in the beginning where I was having to stop and leave the room. But yeah, are you sure, Leshna, Michaela, Jessica, Australiana, Sky was here, Em Bells was here, Michaela, I think I said Michaela. Resonant Reflections was here. Appreciate everyone, you know. So yeah, it's probably a good time to end the stream. Thanks everyone, and yeah, we had a really good chat. Look forward to doing it again next week.